It's a career that has gone full throttle and only one way, right to the top. Channel 9 newsreader Peter Overton has enjoyed more than 30 years on our TV screens, starting in sport, then moving into news, before 60 Minutes came calling. It's been an incredible career, and it all started here at Macquarie University.
Righto.
Okay, so
Here we go.
Peter,
Yes, Sandra.
Bachelor of Economics to TV newsreader. Was media always the end game?
Always the end game, Sandra, without question. Growing up, the 6 o'clock news with Brian Henderson on Channel 9 was our staple. That I used to look at Brian and I think he's got a cool job. Wouldn't mind doing that one day. But the bottom line was I loved asking questions and I loved people's stories. And I knew I wanted to be a journalist. But I knew I wanted to go to university as well. Because I knew that that is, for me, would be part of the process of maturing and growing up and setting myself up for my next steps in my career.
So tell me about time at university. What are your memories of your time here at Macquarie?
I remember turning up on day one to the main quad, which doesn't look anything like it did back in the late 80s. And I didn't know anyone. And I can still remember meeting Jono and Chris. That group just grew and grew and grew. Now, 40 years on, we still have a Christmas lunch every year. Jono and Chris, they're still in that group. I'm still in that group. The friendships are still as strong as ever. I've got some lifelong mates from this place.
Work timeline then. Let's get to, where did it all start for you?
I think I was 15 years of age. The juggernaut Sydney radio station 2UE at the time supported the Children's Hospital where Dad worked. And I said to Dad, I want to do work experience at 2UE. And I said to Dad, can you make a call? He said, sure. So I went in every weekend as a 15-year-old and collated sports results for nothing. Do 12 hours a day. And I used to practice my voice. At the end of my shift, I would go into a studio where John Laws or Alan Jones used to broadcast from, and I'd get all the sports scripts and I'd record myself going, you know, now with sport, here's Peter Overton. They're on cartridges, and I put the cartridges on the desk of the legendary program director. They called him Mr. Radio, John Brennan. And Breno, wondered whether he was listening to them, and then one day I got the phone call where Peter, it's John Brennan. And I said, oh, hello, Breno. You're on. And I was like, wow. So I was doing the sports updates on a Saturday. Chris Kearns, the late Chris Kearns, had the most beautiful voice, incredible radio operator, and he'd be in there hosting 5-state greyhound racing and throwing to rugby league and all sorts of things. And you could smoke then, so he had about 5 cigarettes burning in an ashtray, and it was my first time on, and he said, it's time now for a sports update here on 2UE at 5 to 1. Here's Peter Overton. And then there's just a plume of cigarette smoke, and Chris is there, and I went, thanks very much, Chris, in the rugby. And I looked through the smoke, hoping that he would save me, because I was racked with nerves, drowning. And he was in the form guide, and I had to keep going, and I did. And that was my first time on air.
Have you still got that card?
I wish I did, but I remember it vividly. I can remember everything I was wearing. But that was it.
Happy memory?
Happy memories, because I had to swim. So I finished my degree here at Macquarie, and then Graham McNeice, another incredible mentor of mine, rang me and said, we're starting this satellite TV station called Club Superstation, being beamed into a handful of clubs around New South Wales. We'd love you to come along and join us. So with my Macquarie uni mates, we were on an end of season graduation trip. We'd hired a couple of boats on the Whitsundays, and I'll never forget, I had to ring Graham on a certain day at a certain time, so we pulled into Daydream Island with a bag full of 20-cent coins and got on the old telecom phone then. And they were all my mates from Macquarie were surrounding me, and I'm pumping the coins through, talking to Graham, and he offered me the job, and I got off the phone. I said, I got it, and all my mates cheered. And so I went there, and it was like, I suppose, working in regional television. you did everything. I hosted my own sports show. I'd never been on television. I'd never written it, really. And I did all of that. And then Graham would say, I need you to host greyhound racing. And I didn't know the front end of a dog from the back end of a dog, but I'd be suddenly hosting 5-state greyhound racing and doing updated markets on the second at Wentworth Park in Sydney, throw into the races in Tasmania. Here's the dividends from Brisbane, race 5. It was like, ooh. But I learned to ad lib. I learned to pedal hard. It was university for me, take 2,
Yes.
University of Television. You know, that really set me up, Sandra.
Yes.
Then I got a call and went to Channel 7 Adelaide and read Weekend Sport and was a sports reporter. And then I was suddenly thinking, I don't know, is this caper for me?
Really?
I just was thinking, oh, this is real now, this is commercial TV, and it was pretty full on. And I was really thinking about, do I come back to Macquarie and do a dip ed and become a school teacher?
Really?
It crossed my mind more than once. And I was in my early 20s, and I got one of those fortuitous phone calls from Paul Fenn, Deputy Director of News at 9 in Sydney, and he said, we'd like you to come and join us as a sports reporter. And I was like, well, I'll give it one more go. And I was homesick, desperately homesick. So I said, okay. So I walked through the front gates of Channel 9 when it was at Willoughby in Sydney on the 1st of September 1991. And with the mindset, I'll give it a go. And I'm still here more than 30 years later. So I was a sports reporter for 9 News, working with great people who I soaked up so much knowledge from them. And then the director of news then said, we'd like you to read the morning news for us one day. And I was like, me? And he said, yeah, you. So I did that, and that was a great experience. I really threw myself into that, you know. I remember ringing the legendary Laurie Oakes. I said, Laurie, I'm doing this morning news every morning. Could I do an interview with you when Parliament's sitting? He said, yes, if you come up with the questions. And I said, of course I will. So I would prepare an interview and I'd ring him and he'd go, yep. He was the most generous, caring, wanting to help me. Laurie Oakes, you know, legend. And then a couple of things happened, Sandra, which I think changed the course of my career. The Thredbo disaster. I happened to be in the newsroom, I think it was a weekend morning, Saturday morning maybe. Someone said, there's been a big landslide at Thredbo. Pete, we need you to go on air. You're the only one in the newsroom and you've done some news breaks. Can you go on air? I was like, okay. So I found a shirt, I found a tie, I found a bit of powder and whacked it on and sort of tried to comb my hair. And I went on thinking I was doing a 30-second news break. And back in those days, there was no such thing as a smartphone or anything. And I ended up, I think, going on for 4 or 5 hours. We did rolling coverage, and I was this young bloke.
First time ever?
First time ever. And we're interviewing people on the phone, from paramedics to all sorts of people, trying to explain what this rescue operation for Stuart Diver was looking like. But I think that was a real moment for me in my career. And then the other moment was Super League. And that's when Kerry Packer and Rupert Murdoch went head-to-head. And the Murdochs wanted to have Super League. Mr. Packer backed the ARL, and it ended up, as you know, in court and so on. And they handed down the decision, and it was packed, and Phillip Street was packed in the city, and there were satellite trucks and everything. It was huge. And I came down in the lift trying to figure out what had happened, and these young lawyers said, Pete, there's a summary on the back, and they went through it and they helped me, and because it was full on, you had to get to air. Sprinted down the corridor and got to air. That was another, I think, key moment in my career where maybe I was noticed. And that changed the course of my career, no question.
Because from there, 60 Minutes.
Exactly, and I was at the 2000 Olympic Games here in Sydney, reporting for news, and I, again, will never forget, I had an Ericsson phone with one of those rubber aerials, and it rang. And I answered it, and the voice at the other end said, Peter, it's John Westacott. And he was the executive producer of 60. And I said, oh, g'day, John. We need to have lunch. And it was like, well, I can't. I'm doing the Olympics reporting. He said, oh. Anyway, cut a long story short, we ended up having lunch. And I ended up going to 60 Minutes, starting in 2001, and travelling the planet for up to 8 months of the year for nearly a decade. There's no question it was the most extraordinary experience of my career, seeing the world. At the time, though, it is full-on stress. You have to deliver a product. You have to deliver the moments, the good interviews, the sequences. You are making a small film that's costing a lot of money. You're on a crew of 4, and you can be in Russia, you can be in Newfoundland, you can be in Los Angeles, you can be in Botswana, you can be in Uganda, you can be in Namibia, places I've been. And at the time, wow, it was intense. It's only now, Sandra, when I reflect and the kids ask me, Dad, tell me about interviewing Robbie Williams or Tom Cruise or Nicole Kidman or Arnold Schwarzenegger or being with the Anacondas in Venezuela or the Lions in Kenya or September 11 or the Bali bombings. It's now that I reflect when they ask me questions, or I find myself just talking like I am to you about stories that I have done. I think it's you when you reflect at the time, you know what you are working hard.
Yeah. So it's a bit like an out-of-body experience and a little surreal now when you look back on that.
Surreal is probably a pretty good word. You look back and you think, I've been there, I've spoken to them, I
was in the middle of it.
I was in, I remember ducking under a barrier in New York with Rudy Giuliani and Hillary Clinton, Senator Hillary Clinton at the time, leading a parade just after September 11. And sort of a Secret Service type guy pushing me back up Fifth Avenue or whatever, like saying, what are you doing? I'm going, Mrs. Clinton, Peter Overton from 60 Minutes, Australia, could we have a quick chat? This guy was...
He was going to shoot you.
Yes. But it was that chasing the story, and suddenly I hear this, we love Australia. Would you like an interview? And I went, see you later, mate, and went like that. And the wonderful crew followed me, the soundo and the cameraman, and they're walking backwards up Fifth Avenue or wherever we were, and I'm interviewing Senator Hillary Clinton.
Well done. 60 Minutes, as fantastic as it was, there was even better to come. What happened?
Well, I got a call, we're thinking about changing things up in the news, and we'd like you to come and do the news. And I was like, okay. And I'm a homebody. I'm not a traveller. So that travel nearly a decade at 60 was hard for me. Homesickness I used to be racked by it. So I thought, okay, I'll come back. And then I went into the newsroom.
That is the plum job in television. It is the most successful senior job that any journalist can get.
Well, I felt very lucky. And it was going back to my childhood when I looked at Hendo and said, oh, wow, he's got a great job. So who would have thought?
And he was a mentor to you.
Totally. And when he retired, I still go around every few months and have a cup of tea with him and Marty. And I remember going around just before he wasn't well, and we had a cup of tea, and I knew when I gave him a hug goodbye, and he gave me a hug, and I'll never forget, he said, I love you, Peter. It was so sweet. It was so wonderful. And then, not long before he died, Jessica and I were walking our dog, and my phone rang, and it was Marty saying, Peter, Brian would like to talk to you. So Brian spoke to me, and he was weak of voice, but he had that lovely twinkle in his eye and voice. He said, Peter, I'd love you to speak at my funeral. And I said, oh, Brian, you're going nowhere. He said, don't make it sad. I'll never forget it. He said, just make it funny, make it happy. And it was wow, what an honour.
So when did you come to a point where you were confident that you could then relax a little and focus on life outside of work?
Still finding it. Yes. Even in my position, I've got the balance, and there's no question I've got balance. But I still like to work hard and set an example. Sometimes as my wife says, you can say no, Peter. So I'm getting better at it is perhaps the answer to that. But I haven't hit the sweet spot just yet. Jessica and I, it's a terrific match. We could not be more different. She's a free spirit, and she's quirky, and she's got a lovely eccentricity to her, amazing beauty, the most magnificent mother, magnificent wife in terms of encouraging and supporting me. We've been married for over 20 years. She asked me out on a date.
There you go.
And I said, okay, let's go. And probably batting way beyond my station in life. We have Allegra and Giselle, teenage girls. And I think the key for us as a family, how we operate, is we're very good communicators, and the kids are really good at communicating to us. we have two kids with great emotional intelligence and great empathy, which we feel very proud of as parents. And don't worry, there's your bumps and there's your potholes and there's your falling off a cliff moments, but it works well.
So Peter, it is not just Peter Overton, it's now Dr. Peter Overton, am I right?
It is. Every time Macquarie sends me a letter, it's Dr. Peter Overton AM, and I go, wow, that's cool. But I'll never call myself Dr. Peter Overton. But I did get an honorary doctorate from here for my contribution to broadcast media and for all my charity work over many decades. And that was a lovely moment with Mum and Dad in the same theatre that I had my graduation ceremony. I looked down from the stage as I delivered the graduation address and could see Mum and Dad. And it took me back years, decades to when they were there. So this place is special to me because of all these years on, being invited back, and then the wonderful honour they bestowed on me.
Do you have any advice for young people generally who are thinking about coming to Macquarie next year?
So if you're coming to Macquarie and you're doing your degree, and I'd hugely rely on your instinct, and don't be impatient, let it evolve. Also be really good listeners and don't know it all, because as I've said in my graduation addresses here, the key from this wonderful academic institution, the key, and you're looked after, there's no question. But when you leave, the most important thing you must leave with is the ability to connect with your fellow human beings. Because human connection in this world of AI and technology and so on is still the most important thing. And you will not survive in the workplace, in life, if you don't have human connection.
Peter Overton, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Sandra.